G'day everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. So in today's video, we're going to be grading every single AFL team's 2022 AFL season. And of course, with the grading process, we will grade the teams compared to expectations. If you're going to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, that'd be much appreciated. And let's get into today's video. Righty everyone, here we are. So I've just included the tier maker alongside the graphics just to make this video a bit more interactive. So simply we'll just go over each team in alphabetical order, like we do for all these team videos on the channel. We'll kick it off though with the Adelaide Crows, and considering that they were expected to finish the bottom four, they didn't do that. I just felt like they had somewhat of an okay year, Adelaide. I just really love what they did with playing multiple youth, and I feel like they proved a lot of people wrong. Expected to finish bottom four. I couldn't really see them getting out of the bottom four this year, but just with every loss this year, they just felt really competitive. If you wanted to beat the Crows this year, you had to really push them and grind them throughout the whole duration of the game. There were no really easy pushover. Of course, there are a few games this season when they did play poor, but apart from that, I still felt like they had somewhat of a really nice year. A few of their youth really did blossom this year too. I'm going to be giving their grade for 2022 a solid C. Now moving on to the Brisbane Lions, and they are a side that did end up finishing in the final four of 2022, which is a pretty good season for them, you do feel, for the Brizzy Lions. But they're a side I feel like that are in their prime. They're a team that has a lot of that 24 to 29-year-old range that are in their prime. Yeah, they've got a bit of youth coming through, but I just feel like this is their time to really be making grand final appearances. They're just so close at the moment. Another year very close from making a grand final performance. But the season was not a complete failure, still produced a really nice home and away season. Bit of inconsistency with a few performances, and considering where they were expected to go first round exits according to the odds and really all that stuff, but they proved it wrong. Really two strong finals, wins in a row, ended up finish up in the final four. I'm going to be grading them a solid B for 2022. Moving on now to Carlton's season. This is just a really interesting team to grade. Do you want to be harsh and give them a D because they're a team that's really pushing for finals? That year that they did have, in the 8 for every single week of 2022, you feel like, you've got to really think, could they really have a great given the D? Look, I think that's probably a bit harsh. And this year they've just been very strong. What Michael Voss has been able to do in this first year was very good. They're, in my opinion, still a team that their gap between the best 3 or 4 players and the rest of their side is quite poor. It's a huge gap. It felt like that second half of the year their role players weren't offering enough, and that's what caused them to show a bit of inconsistencies. But I feel like they're a team maybe that will build team chemistry as they do go. But still a really strong year they had. Another Coleman medalist, a Brownlow medalist this year. The contested game was really strong. I felt like it was a pretty good year, I think, for Carlton. But still, you've got to be making finals. The first team since the 70s not to make finals with being in the top 8 every single week of the season. So I feel like I do want to be a bit harsh with Carlton, a team that really should be making finals, unable to. I'll still give them a C, but I'm going to be grading them a C-. Now moving on to the Collingwood Magpies, and quite simple one here for Collingwood. It is a deserving A grade, and do I give them an A+? I think I have to. An A+ is really deserving for Collingwood this year. A team that was easily predicted to finish bottom 4 under the new first-year coach of 𝐓𝐴, and look what he's done to the playing group. They're really youth reliant, they're very heavy, youth heavy. The second half of last year, 𝐓𝐴 comes in and just changes the playing group. They play with a lot more aggression, a lot more dare. Their turnover stats are scary. They're one of the best transition sides we've seen this year. Exciting team to watch. Made the prelim final. Really unlucky not to go through to the grand final. Awesome year, the Magpies. Quite simply, A+. Now moving on to the Dons, and well, from finals last year to just a really poor season, I think it's quite obvious. I'm going to be giving Essendon the lowest grade possible in this video, a D-. Ended up finishing bottom 4, season to forget. Just a lot of poor performances they've had this year. Just felt like their marquee players from last year, this year, they just were injured, very inconsistent. It just wasn't their year. Coach sacked, no brainer really. Dons D-. Now moving on to Fremantle, and I reckon a truly deserving grade from has to be just a solid A. The season they really did have was special. They've started the home away season, started off like a house on fire. Just got some really good consistencies strung together throughout the course of the season. A lot of the scouts they did have were very good, knocking off the Demons for the first time, their first loss of 2022, and then knocking off, I think it was the week after, Geelong away. A really awesome year Freo did have. Of course, with the young side, they still are a very young side. There's just going to be games where they just play a bit poor. They lost a few of those really season-defining games, which cancelled them out top 4. But they still won a finals game this year. I thought they were just awesome to watch this year. I think they're a solid A side, I reckon, compared to their expectation for Fremantle. Now moving on to Geelong, and a pretty simple grade to give them here. Of course, has to be an A+, for them taking home the flag of 2022. Too old, too slow, too good, as they do say the slogan, and it is a perfect slogan to really sum up their scenario and their season for the Cats. A team that was really tipped to be on the decline now with their aging talent. You just felt like maybe this or next year was just their chance to really get that one more crack, and they were able to do it perfectly with winning the flag. Just managed and rested their older players so exceptionally well this year. Really got some good use out of their star players. Recruited really well, bringing in Tyson Stengel. Just an awesome year, the Cats. A+, no brainer. Now moving on to the Gold Coast Suns, and I feel like it's one of their best seasons ever in their existence of the footy club. I think it was, they ended up finishing on 10 wins for the season, which is really strong. Mid-table, I really could have pushed into finals, but it's still a very inexperienced side. Still a bit of a young side in a way, I reckon, Gold Coast. A few really nice scalps that they did have this year, whilst a few poor performances on the other hand of things. And I'm going to be giving them a solid C grade for 2022. They didn't really have a poor season. They didn't really have a great season. They had an okay season, I reckon. It was, yes, their best season of 2022, but they really could have made it push into finals. I feel like a solid C grade is fitting for the Suns of their year. Now moving on to GWS, and pretty simple grade to give them here. D-, a team with the least I have, they really should be performing a lot better. Just a lot of overpaid players, it just seems, at that club. And the good thing during the trade period as we speak, they're having just having a mass removal of players, which could really give their playing list a bit of a spring cleaning, probably the best way to put it. But comparing, looking at their season this year, won a finals game last year, you feel like they're going to be, at worst, a mid-table side, but bottom 4 this year. Really a lot of lazy performances. We're just awfully inconsistent. Really bad thing to see with just a talented list they do have. And of course their coach sacked halfway through the season. So yeah, D- for the Giants, bottom 4 finishes, not the season they wanted. Now moving on to Hawthorn, and another one of those teams that were predicted to finish bottom 4 and ended up finishing 13th, which is a mid-table side for 2022. And I'm going to be giving them a solid C+ for their season. It wasn't the greatest season, I imagine, still a mid-table side, but just looking at the list they did have, first-year coach, I thought they progressed really nicely in 2022. This is maybe a really solid step into something special in the years to come for the Hawks. Have invested really well in the draft. A few of their really young talent really blossomed this year. Mitch Lewis with the breakout year, Dylan Moore, you could say as well. Josh Ward, Connor McDonald with really awesome years. James Sicily with a career best year. I feel like across many departments of the ground, they're looking quite strong. They're bringing in Carlton on. Hopefully, maybe she's along top of that in the draft. I feel like, they had some really solid wins this year. The Hawks played some, solid footy, I reckon, compared to expectations. C+ for their season. Now moving on to the Melbourne Demons, and I'm going to be grading them a B- for 2022. I feel like that's a pretty harsh but fair grade for the D's. I'm not going to be giving them a C because you start to remember the start of the season, 10-0. They look like they're going to be on track for maybe another back-to-back premiership, but So the second year they did have was just not what they wanted. Went out in straight sets, was awfully poor. I just feel like for the Demons, once Tom McDonald went down, they really struggled because they struggled with that forward half structure which they really did need. They had a lot of losses this year where they failed to really put on the points or scoreboard pressure when it mattered. Just whenever the pressure came to the Demons, they really failed to hit back, which is a bit of a concern. Obviously still made the top 4, but going out in straight sets, it's a B- for the Demons of 2022, I reckon. We're on now to North Melbourne, and it's a no-brainer. Going to be giving them a D- for 2022. Not really much to really justify them to to give them a high grade, really. Wooden spooners, Really wanted to see a bit of an improvement for 2022. Maybe if they, strung a few more wins or another win or two together, could be giving them another higher grade. But even though they had some really nice looking plays this year, they just really failed to really galvanise as a team this year. Wooden Spooners, some awfully poor performances this year. A lot of over 100-point defeats. Simple grade to give them, D-. Move on now to Port Adelaide, and it was quite simply a failed season. Made the prelim final last year, where you felt contention to really keep up there in the hunt for a potential grand final position in 2022, but they just had an absolute shocker of a season. Maybe it was a bit of a dip, maybe a dip year, as they do say, because you just look at a few of those players in this year. The coach was awfully poor this year. Ollie Wines and Travis Boak, just none of those players just awfully inconsistent, not themselves, a shell of themselves this year. I'm going to be giving them a D, solid D. Failed year, really expected to make finals, did not. Ended up finishing mid-table, 5 start, inconsistent year. Quite simply, a solid D grade for Port Adelaide. Now moving on to Richmond, and I'm going to be giving them a B. I feel like that is a pretty solid grade from this year. Probably expected to finish finals. Probably a number of people, including myself, did tip them to make it. But I just like their season, really, Richmond. Of course, a few just a main look at it. I think it was a really just solid year, best way to put it. A number of their players, young and old, really did galvanise this year. Jack Riewoldt and Tom Lynch with an awesome year, and Dion Prestia, just a really well balanced side, I reckon. Richmond, their turnover game was sort of back in the second half of the season. They really got going with the turnover stats. A few of their young players as well. Tyler Sonsie coming in the second half of the year was awesome. 𝐓𝐴𝐺𝐝 really produced a strong first year. I just felt like across many areas of the ground, they were a well-balanced side. The Tigers, very unlucky, their season as well, such a fine line from being, they could have maybe been grand finals, to be honest. Very close loss against the Lions. A lot of close losses this year. So, you could probably give them maybe a lower grade. But I just really love their season, the Tigers. I'll give them a solid B. Now moving on to St Kilda, and it is another year without finals. Just a very inconsistent year they managed to have. And just looking at, expectations, they want to make finals. Start of the year exceptionally well, but just looking at their list, very similar to Carlton. And speaking of Carlton, I will be giving the same grade as them. C-. I think that's a very fitting grade for them. Just at least that's very mediocre. You look at Jack Sinclair, you look at Jack Steele, you look at Max King, awesome plays, but then the gap between the rest of their list is just not good enough. I do feel they really, they treated the season like a sprint, not a marathon. That's probably the best way to put it. Got really burnt out and just looked exhausted in the second half of the year. Played awfully inconsistent. Pretty simple, a C-. I still want to give them a C because I feel like they had some really good wins this year. Obviously wins over, let's say Geelong were really awesome. First half of the year, 5 wins in a row. It's just a season with ups and downs, but another year without finals. C- for St Kilda. Now moving on to the Sydney Swans, team that were predicted to make finals. You couldn't really see them slipping up too much this year. They were on the ropes really after that loss against Essendon, but managed to produce a really strong second half of the year and finish in the top 4, make the grand final, but an awful loss, a huge loss in the grand final. Does that affect their grade? I believe it does. They're a side that's easily an A grade side this year, I reckon, for the Swans. But just considering the huge loss and also a bit of inconsistencies for Sydney, I'm going to be giving them an A-. Still really strong year they did have. A lot of their youth and the veterans too were really solid this year. They really galvanised in the second half of the year, produced some solid wins, major scalps, but a few inconsistencies. An absolute shocker of a grand final defeat. I'll be giving them an A-. Now moving on to the West Coast Eagles, and look, considering because of their expectations, they were predicted to finish bottom 4, the injuries they did have, the COVID top-ups, I do really understand that that's a bit of an excuse now. People saying this after loss, saying, this is just an excuse now. They have to be playing better footy. I still do feel I'm still going to be giving them a D-. I know I'd love to give them a D, a bit of a higher grade, but I just really can't see it. I do agree. It was a bit of an excuse, just saying, the COVID top-ups, the injuries they did have. They really, felt like they could maybe get a major scalp or two with a few of their wins, but just, only 2 wins for the season. Absolutely poor. few games are really talking up to a few opposition. You know, I remember Geelong was a close loss, even against the Crows. They really did have a few of those really solid performances, but yeah, just considering, you know, they're a side that just were awfully poor this year. A lot of their star players were just on the decline. Really, they really need that young talent. They lack a lot of, you know, the talent as well. Speaking of it, but yeah, D- for West Coast, a pretty simple grade to give out. And the final team to grade, the Western Bulldogs. Yeah, I mean, you could really give them anything here. It's an odd one because the Bulldogs, compared from last year, were just poor. Really shell of themselves in 2022. A lot of inconsistencies. You look at their midfield and it's star-studded with multiple awesome players. You felt like their forward line were really going to get going. You know, Norton another year in the system. Same with 𝐻𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐻. But they really failed to capitalise on that. But as they do say, if you have a massive grand final loss, you usually struggle a bit next year, and that's what we did see. They looked exhausted with a few performances this year. You know, looking at the back line, that was their main problem. Just a lot of inconsistencies. A few revelations though with Sam Darcy and 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐿. Yeah, you know, had a few nice games, a few good glimpses. You feel like a few of their youth is really going to blossom next year. But just looking at their season, look, I'm just going to give it. They still made finals, so I will be a bit nice and give them a C. Even though they're just awful, you know, in a few games this year. But still had some strong performances, just really inconsistent. But it wasn't a complete failure of a season because they still did make finals. But weren't really expected to beat Freo in Perth, that's safe to say. So I'll be giving them a C. So there we are, everyone, with grading every single team's 2022 performance. As you can see on the tier maker, there's just a rough overview of what I graded them. And in the graphic down below, I've given them the exact grade of what I've wanted to give them. So feel free to let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your fellas' thoughts. So everyone, that is the end of today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you wanted to enjoy today's video. Currently, of course, in the off season, so schedule for off season, probably will upload maybe once or twice a week. Just, you know, keep it somewhat active on the channel, but not try and pump up too much content. Yeah, of course, currently in trade period, so a bit of trade content will be out on the channel soon, so stay tuned. And yeah, thank you for tuning in, fellas, in today's video, and I'll talk to you later. See you later, fellas.